Hello, Teacher Riga here. Today I'm here to explain the difference between First Language English, FLE, versus English as a Second Language, ESL. Now, as a tuition teacher, I've had to explain this to many parents many times over, so I thought I'll make this video to share the differences. Now, this is especially helpful for parents who are switching their children from the national system to the international system, right? From SK, SMK schools to IGCSE syllabuses. It can be for private candidates who want to sit for the IGCSE exams on their own. And in general, for parents who they themselves were from the national schooling system, they took SPM, so they don't understand the struggles or the differences that their children are facing in international schools right now. Okay, so as the name suggests, First Language English are for speakers who have so much exposure to English. Everyone around them spoke English growing up. They consume a lot of English media, so they're generally fluent in the subject already. English as a second language, well, those students might have many other languages that they are also pursuing, that they are also studying at the same time, right? So they might need a stronger foundation, stronger basics for English, okay? So English as a second language, ESL, that is similar to SPM, right? Because we're a multiracial, multicultural country and we all have our mother tongue, so most, if not all of our speakers are English as a second language speaker. So when it comes to the basics, you have 4 parts of language that you need to master. So there will be different sections of exams to cater to this, like reading, writing, listening, speaking, right? 4 different parts. Well, for ESL, you end up with 3 different exam papers because they put reading and writing together, 2 hours. So you have around 15 reading style questions. So subjective questions with short answers. There's multiple choice, right? There are essays that you need to understand to be able to get the correct answers. And then there's 2 essays, writing, right? That you have to do. One, it's usually an email, and then another one, it could be a report, article, review, right? Classic essay. But let's talk about the word count here. For both those essays, the word count for ESL is 120 to 160 words. So it's a very small, very short word count. Okay? And then you have the listening paper, right? You have a question paper where all the essays, all the statements are being read to you audio, and you have to focus and then you have to get your answers, right? That's around an hour. And then a speaking test, 15 minutes. So, 3 different sections. You have an interview, short talk, and then more deeper discussion questions. But the thing here is that SPM, this is in pairs, right? But then for ESL, it's individual, right? So they ask you basic questions about your life, but also about current affairs. Now, 4 parts to what they are testing. Okay, what about First Language English? Now, in FLE, they are already assuming that you're good at listening and speaking. So they're not looking to test that. So they have 2 papers, paper 1 and paper 2, and it's all about reading and writing. Now, let me break down the word count for FLE. So there are many sections. So for paper 1, you start off with reading comprehension, some questions, and then you have the summary section. That one, no more than 120 words because they're trying to get you to be concise, to share the maximum amount of information in the minimum amount of words. So there, sure, 120 words. But then after that, you have some vocab questions and some smaller writer's effect question. Okay, so for the writer's effect question, the big one, that's 200 to 250 words. Okay, And then after that, that one is a paragraph of an answer, right? But then after that, you have a full essay that they want you to write. We call this the extended response essay. That one, 250 to 300 words. Okay, that's paper 1. Paper 2, you have a smaller writer's effect question, and then you have another big essay to write. That's 250 to 350 words. That's directed writing. You have some essays to look at for some points, but then you have to give your own points as well. Full essay there. And then the last section, that's descriptive writing or narrative writing. You get to choose one type of writing, but that is the longest amount of words, 350 to 450 words. So you have 3 big essays across paper 1 and paper 2, and then smaller paragraphs that you have to write as well for summary, for writer's effect, for the smaller subjective style questions. So that's a lot of writing. The thing about FLE is that a lot of the techniques you have to learn at a deeper level, a more advanced level, in a sense that it is very much like literature, right? A little like literature in its techniques, and you have to learn like figurative language, simile, metaphor, personification. You have to learn how to analyze it in text and use it yourself in your own essays, you know? So there's like a creative element there that is much more like literature, I would say, right? So ESL, FLE, right? Like ESL, we are teaching you like grammar strategies, like subject-verb agreement, right? But like FLE, we already assume you know that and you're going to use that properly, so we're going to teach you something else, right? That's why we're teaching you similes and metaphors. Okay? There's no such thing as one subject is better than the other. It depends on your child's level, standards, and what is suitable for them, right? So if your child needs a lot of basics, then you want them to be in ESL because they'll be challenged appropriately. They'll be learning a lot. They'll be improving their language, right? Because if your child needs the basics but you simply put them in FLE because, you know, it's like you feel like that's more superior, like they'll be lost, they'll be struggling, they don't have a good foundation, then they're learning all these advanced techniques. You know, they might have had a better chance doing really well in ESL than doing well in FLE, right? So you have to think about that. And if your child's already really fluent in the language, you don't want them to sit in ESL because then they'll be bored. They'll be getting A's and they don't really feel like they can learn anything else. But there's so much more they have to learn in language, right? So then you want to put them in FLE because then they'll be like paying attention during English class, right? They'll be like, oh, I actually don't know all these techniques and I have so much more to learn. And so the money that you're paying will be worth it, right? For these international schools. Okay. So that's the general idea there. When it comes to the future, universities, working, the job world, let's see. Of course, universities, you have to write really long essays, like 2,000 words, right? 4,000 words. So I would say if your child's already fluent, you want to put them in FLE because then they will have a head start that they can write for long periods of time, long amounts of words. So that's something to consider. Of course, you want your children to learn advanced techniques so that it helps them in their future. But again, if their foundations aren't strong yet, they're not ready for that, you know? So they have to have a strong foundation first. When it comes to universities in Malaysia, whether it's local or private, many of them for foundation programs, right? Because IGCSE is just SPM, you need something else to get to a degree, right? And a lot of the time students do foundation programs or they do A-levels, right? For foundation programs, most universities are not so picky between ESL and FLE. So of course, you can call, if your children know exactly which degree, which university, you can call their admissions enrollment department and ask them, is it okay if my child takes ESL? Can they still join without having to take any extra exams, right? Because when it comes to going overseas and studying in like the UK or Australia or whatever, they might ask you to do IELTS, right? An extra exam to prove that you're good in English. And at times, if they see that you have first language English, they might waiver that. Though I'm not so sure, depending on your university, depending on what's going on in the world, like what they allow and not allow that year. So again, you might want to call up the admissions and ask about these questions. But for the most part, your child should be able to go for A levels or foundations with ESL or FLE, right? So no issues there. Of course, it depends on what you want to see in that exam slip. Like, it's easier to get an A star in ESL, right? Because that's more foundational. So if you are worried that, like if they challenge themselves and they try to learn it, you get 2 years to learn this, year 10 and year 11 usually, right? Maybe even if your children, like year 10, they try out FLE, but they're getting like C's and D's, you might want to switch them over to ESL where they're more comfortable. If you care about getting the A star, like if you want all A stars, like you want that A, if that matters to you, sure, you can take ESL. Though of course, if your child gets like B or C in FLE versus their friend or sibling who gets like A star in ESL, you know that they had a way different exam paper, way harder, way more literature based exam paper, right, to do. So can you handle them getting a B or C for FLE? If you can, like if you're like, it's okay, I want them to feel challenged, and it's okay if they're struggling and they don't get that A star, that's fine. Then you can keep them at FLE, right? Okay, I know I'm making FLE sound difficult, but it's actually not. The two exam papers, you can learn them and you can get the A star, especially for students who are already fluent in the language. They are already great at English. There should be no problem. So as a tuition teacher, I give them the best tips and techniques. I give them specific feedback, specific guidance, and a lot of my students, they do really well because that's the missing piece, right? They didn't have the technique. Once they apply the techniques, then getting that A star should be no problem. So I'm not trying to say that FLE is difficult, right? It is more difficult than ESL, but again, if your children are already good at English, they can get the A star here too, no problem. So just doing a little tuition promo here. I also teach ESL and I love that as well. And the more time I have with your children, the more of an impact I can create. But whatever it is, like I am able to give them like the best advice.